The morning sun cast long shadows across the training grounds of Fort Carson as Private Sarah Mitchell adjusted her gear for the third time. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the caffeine she'd consumed, trying to stay awake after another sleepless night. The other soldiers in her unit were already forming up near the obstacle course, their voices carrying across the dusty field in a mixture of excitement and nervous energy. Sarah had been at Fort Carson for 6 weeks now, and every single day had been a test of her resolve. She was one of only 3 women in her basic training company, and the constant scrutiny felt like a weight she carried everywhere she went. The drill sergeants pushed everyone hard, but she noticed the extra attention they gave her movements, her form, her every mistake. "Hey, Mitchell," called out Private Rodriguez from across the formation. "Try not to hold us back today, yeah?" A few soldiers chuckled, and Sarah felt her cheeks burn. Rodriguez wasn't particularly cruel, but his casual dismissal stung more than outright hostility would have. At least with open antagonism, she could fight back. This casual assumption of her inadequacy was harder to combat. Drill Sergeant Williams blew his whistle, and the company snapped to attention. Williams was a compact man with 22 years of service etched into every line of his weathered face. He had a reputation for being fair, but demanding, and Sarah had yet to earn even a nod of approval from him. "Today we're running the full combat readiness assessment," Williams announced, his voice carrying easily across the assembled troops. "You'll navigate the obstacle course, complete tactical exercises, and finish with marksmanship evaluation. Your performance today goes into your permanent record, so I suggest you treat this seriously." Sarah's stomach tightened. The marksmanship portion had been her biggest worry since arriving at basic training. Growing up in rural Montana, she'd learned to shoot from her grandfather, but military precision shooting was different. The techniques, the equipment, the pressure, everything felt foreign despite her familiarity with firearms. The obstacle course came first, and Sarah found her rhythm quickly. Her smaller frame worked to her advantage here, allowing her to navigate tight spaces and low crawls more efficiently than some of the larger soldiers. She finished in the middle of the pack, earning a few surprised looks but no comments. The tactical exercises followed: urban combat scenarios, team coordination drills, and equipment handling tests. Sarah worked methodically through each station, focusing on precision over speed. She learned early in training that trying to keep up with the fastest soldiers often led to mistakes that cost more time than they saved. At the communication station, she successfully established radio contact with command in under 3 minutes, beating the required time by 30 seconds. At the medical station, she properly treated a simulated compound fracture and identified signs of shock in a training mannequin. Her confidence grew with each completed task, but it was during the equipment maintenance station that things went sideways. Private Johnson, a stocky soldier from Texas who'd made no secret of his belief that women didn't belong in combat roles, was struggling with his weapon cleaning. When he noticed Sarah efficiently breaking down and reassembling her rifle, his frustration boiled over. "Must be nice having them go easy on you," he muttered loud enough for others to hear. "Bet they don't even check your work properly." Sarah's hands stilled on her weapon. She'd cleaned and maintained this rifle dozens of times, following every regulation to the letter. Her grandfather had taught her that a soldier's weapon was their lifeline, and she treated it with corresponding respect. "I follow the same standards as everyone else," she said quietly, not looking up from her work. Johnson snorted. "Right, just like how you followed the same standards during PT and somehow passed the run despite being 30 seconds over time." The accusation hit like a physical blow. Sarah's PT scores were actually above average, and she'd never received any special treatment. But Johnson's words found their mark because they voiced the fear that lived in the back of her mind, that maybe she was only here because the Army needed to meet quotas, not because she belonged. "That's enough, Johnson," said Private Chun, who rarely spoke up during confrontations. "Focus on your own gear." But the damage was done. Sarah finished her equipment check in silence, aware that several soldiers were now watching her with new speculation in their eyes. The doubt that Johnson had planted would spread, she knew. It always did. The marksmanship range was their final station, and Sarah's anxiety peaked as they approached the firing line. She'd performed adequately in previous shooting exercises, but nothing that would silence her critics. The targets today were set at various distances, some close-range scenarios, others requiring precision at longer ranges. Drill Sergeant Williams called out firing positions, and Sarah found herself between Rodriguez and Private Taylor, a quiet soldier from Alabama who'd been friendly but distant since training began. The weight of the M4 rifle felt familiar in her hands, but her breathing was too fast, her grip too tight. "Relax, Mitchell," Williams said as he walked behind the firing line. Shooting scared never hit anything worth hitting. Sarah forced herself to slow her breathing, remembering her grandfather's voice. "The rifle don't care if you're nervous, kiddo, but it'll punish you for it if you let the nerves control your hands." The first round of firing was at 50 meters, basic accuracy shots with iron sights. Sarah settled into her prone position, finding her natural point of aim. The target seemed impossibly small through the sight post, but she squeezed the trigger slowly, following through on each shot. When they checked targets, Sarah's grouping was tight, all shots within the required scoring area. Not exceptional, but solid. She heard Rodriguez grunt in what might have been approval, but Johnson's earlier comments echoed her mind, making her question whether the instructors were actually grading her fairly. The second round moved to 100 meters with optical sights. The additional distance and equipment change rattled some shooters, but Sarah adapted quickly. Her grandfather had taught her to shoot at various ranges around their property, often with different rifles and scopes. The muscle memory served her well. This time, her grouping was even tighter. Drill Sergeant Williams paused at her target longer than usual, making notes on his clipboard. Sarah couldn't read his expression, but she saw him glance back at her position before moving on. The murmurs from other soldiers grew more pronounced. Some seemed genuinely impressed, while others appeared skeptical. Johnson made a show of examining her target closely, as if looking for evidence of some kind of favoritism or error in scoring. "Lucky wind," he said loud enough for her to hear. "Weather's been helping the weaker shooters all day." Sarah bit back her response. The wind had actually been gusting inconsistently, making shooting more challenging, not easier. But arguing would only draw more attention to herself, and she'd learned that defending her performance often backfired. The final round was the most challenging, 200 meters with moving targets that appeared for limited time windows. This exercise separated the natural shooters from those who merely followed procedure. It required instinct, timing, and the ability to make rapid adjustments. Sarah watched the demonstration, noting the target timing and movement patterns. When her turn came, she settled into position with a calmness that surprised her. The first target appeared from the left, and she tracked it smoothly, leading appropriately before taking her shot. The target dropped immediately. The second target came from the right, moving faster. Sarah adjusted her lead and fired. Another hit. By the fourth target, she found a rhythm that felt almost meditative. Her breathing, her trigger control, her target tracking, everything synchronized into smooth, efficient motion. When the exercise ended, an unusual quiet had settled over the firing line. Sarah looked up to see Drill Sergeant Williams staring at her target through binoculars, his expression unreadable. Other soldiers were craning their necks to see her results, and she caught snippets of whispered conversations. "Check the spotting scope," Williams called to his assistant. "I want confirmation on Lane 7. Lane 7 was Sarah's position. She remained prone, uncertain whether she should stand or wait for instructions. The assistant instructor jogged to the 200-meter line with spotting equipment, taking his time to examine her target thoroughly. When he returned, he whispered something to Williams that made the drill sergeant's eyebrows rise. Williams nodded slowly, then walked over to Sarah's position. "Stand up, Private Mitchell," he said. Sarah rose to attention, her mind racing through possible infractions or errors she might have committed. Williams studied her for a long moment, then looked back at the distant target. In 22 years of training soldiers, he said in a voice that carried to the entire line, I've seen maybe a dozen people put that kind of pattern on a moving target exercise. Where'd you learn to shoot like that? The question caught Sarah off guard. She'd expected criticism or skepticism, not what sounded almost like respect in Williams' voice. My grandfather taught me, drill sergeant. He was a Marine sniper in Vietnam. Williams nodded slowly. What was his name? Staff Sergeant Robert Mitchell, drill sergeant. Something flickered in Williams' eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or surprise. He made another note on his clipboard, then dismissed the formation for equipment cleaning. But as the other soldiers began packing their gear, Sarah noticed Williams pulling out his radio and walking away from the group. The conversation was too quiet and distant for her to make out words, but she saw him gesturing toward the target range while speaking. Whatever he was discussing seemed important, and Sarah had the distinct feeling it concerned her performance. Rodriguez approached as she was cleaning her rifle. His usual casual dismissiveness had been replaced by something that might have been grudging respect. Nice shooting, Mitchell, he said. That moving target sequence was impressive. Thank you, Sarah replied, unsure how to respond to his unexpected acknowledgement. My cousin's a Marine sniper, Rodriguez continued. He always said the gift either runs in families or it doesn't. Guess it runs in yours. The comment stayed with Sarah as they finished cleaning equipment and prepared to return to quarters. For the first time since arriving at Fort Carson, she felt like she'd proven something meaningful. Not to silence all the doubts or criticisms, but to establish that she belonged here based on merit, not quotas or lowered standards. But as they walked back toward the barracks, Sarah noticed Johnson talking quietly with a group of soldiers, occasionally glancing in her direction. His expression suggested he wasn't ready to accept her performance at face value, and she suspected her shooting success might actually intensify scrutiny rather than reduce it. Williams was still on his radio when they left the range, and Sarah caught him looking in her direction more than once. Something about his demeanor suggested that her performance had triggered something bigger than just a good training day evaluation. That evening, during the brief personal time before lights out, Sarah found herself thinking about her grandfather. He'd always told her that exceptional shooting was about more than just technique. It required a calmness under pressure that couldn't be taught, only discovered. Today, for the first time since arriving at basic training, she'd felt that calmness. But she also knew that one good day wouldn't be enough to change perceptions completely. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities to prove herself. The difference was that now she had evidence, witnessed by her entire unit, that she possessed skills worthy of respect. As she prepared for sleep, Sarah realized that William's radio conversation and his unusual interest in her family background might mean her shooting performance had consequences she hadn't anticipated. The thought was both exciting and intimidating. Recognition could open doors, but it could also bring unwanted attention. The last thing she heard before sleep was Johnson's voice from across the barracks, complaining to anyone who would listen about special treatment and lucky shots. But for once, his criticism felt less cutting. Sarah had numbers and witnesses now, objective proof of her capabilities. Tomorrow would reveal whether that proof would be enough to change the dynamic she'd been fighting since the day she arrived at Fort Carson. Sarah woke before reveille, as had become her habit during basic training. The pre-dawn quiet gave her a few precious minutes to mentally prepare for whatever the day would bring. But this morning felt different. Yesterday's shooting performance had shifted something fundamental in how she viewed her place in the unit. The change became apparent immediately during morning formation. Several soldiers who had previously ignored her now nodded acknowledgement when she took her place in ranks. Rodriguez even offered a brief "Morning, Mitchell" that carried none of his usual condescension. The recognition felt good, but Sarah remained cautious about reading too much into temporary shifts in attitude. Drill Sergeant Williams appeared precisely at reveille, but he wasn't alone. A tall woman in dress uniform accompanied him, her bearing and insignia immediately commanding attention. Sarah recognized the eagle insignia of a colonel, though she couldn't make out the name tape from her position information. Company attention! Williams barked, and 60 soldiers snapped into perfect alignment. The colonel surveyed the formation with the practiced eye of someone who had evaluated thousands of soldiers throughout her career. When her gaze passed over Sarah, there was no particular recognition or interest, just the methodical assessment of a senior officer reviewing troops. "This is Colonel Rebecca Torres," Williams announced. "She's here to observe training and evaluate our program effectiveness. You will extend her every courtesy and continue performing to standard. Carry on with scheduled activities." The morning proceeded normally through PT, chow, and equipment maintenance. But Sarah noticed the colonel observing various training activities, sometimes taking notes, occasionally asking questions of the drill instructors. During the morning's classroom session on military law, Torres sat in the back, her presence adding an extra layer of formality to the proceedings. It wasn't until they moved to the training fields for tactical exercises that Sarah understood the colonel's true purpose. Torres positioned herself near the marksmanship instructors, reviewing clipboards and examining training records. When Williams pointed toward the previous day's target results still posted on the range board, the colonel's attention sharpened noticeably. The day's training focused on small unit tactics, squad-level movements, communication protocols, and coordinated exercises that tested teamwork under simulated combat conditions. Sarah found herself assigned to a fire team with Rodriguez, Johnson, and Private Baker, a competent soldier who generally stayed out of interpersonal conflicts. Their first exercise involved clearing a mock building complex while maintaining communication with supporting elements. Johnson took point, Rodriguez covered the rear, Baker handled communications, and Sarah was assigned overwatch with the designated marksman rifle. The scenario began smoothly enough. Johnson's aggressive approach worked well for the close quarters elements, while Rodriguez's steady presence kept the team coordinated. But when they reached the final building, things became complicated. The exercise called for Sarah to provide covering fire while the team moved across an exposed courtyard. Her position on an elevated platform gave her clear sight lines, but the simulation required her to engage multiple pop-up targets while tracking friendly positions below. The first few targets were straightforward, clearly marked hostiles appearing in predetermined locations. Sarah engaged them efficiently, calling out each successful hit for the team below. But then the exercise escalated with multiple targets appearing simultaneously, some positioned dangerously close to her teammates' movement routes. Sarah's training took over. She prioritized targets based on threat level and proximity to friendlies, engaging them in rapid succession while maintaining constant communication with the ground team. Her shots were precise and quick, clearing threats without hesitation. "Overwatch, we're taking fire from a second-floor window," Rodriguez called over the radio. Sarah had already identified the target, but held her shot because Johnson was moving directly into her line of fire. Instead of taking the difficult shot, she called down, "Friendly in my line of fire. Take cover behind the concrete barrier while I reposition." The decision cost precious seconds, but it demonstrated tactical awareness that impressed the observing instructors. Sarah moved quickly to an alternate position, acquired the target, and engaged successfully without endangering her teammate. When the exercise concluded, the evaluation team gathered around the observing officers. Sarah could see Williams and Colonel Torres reviewing notes while watching video playback of the exercise on a tablet. Their conversation was too distant to hear, but both officers appeared focused on specific portions of the recording. Johnson approached as Sarah was cleaning her weapon. His usual hostility had been replaced by something more complex, a mixture of respect and residual resentment that he seemed to be struggling to reconcile. "That was good shooting up there," he said grudgingly. "Even if you did cost us time with all that safety protocol." Sarah looked up from her rifle maintenance. Better to complete the mission safely than to risk friendly fire for a few seconds. "Maybe," Johnson conceded. "But in real combat, those few seconds could mean everything. Rodriguez overheard and joined a conversation. In real combat, you don't get second chances if you drop your own people. Mitchell made the right call. The exchange marked the first time Sarah had heard Rodriguez openly support her tactical decision-making. Johnson seemed to consider arguing, but ultimately walked away without further comment. His willingness to acknowledge her shooting skills, even while questioning her judgment, represented progress of sorts. The afternoon brought individual skills assessments, physical fitness tests, equipment proficiency checks, and personal interviews with senior instructors. When Sarah's name was called for her interview, she reported to a small office building where Williams waited with Colonel Torres. Private Mitchell, reporting is ordered, Sarah said, coming to attention in front of the desk. At ease, Private, Torres replied. Have a seat. The colonel's manner was professional, but not intimidating. She reviewed a folder containing what Sarah assumed were her training records, occasionally making notes or checking specific details. Your marksmanship scores are impressive, Torres began. Yesterday's performance particularly so. Drill Sergeant Williams tells me your grandfather was a Marine sniper. Yes, ma'am. Staff Sergeant Robert Mitchell, 3rd Battalion, 4th Marines. Torres nodded. What are your career goals in the Army? The question caught Sarah somewhat off guard. Most interviews during basic training focused on immediate performance and compliance, not long-term aspirations. I want to serve where I can be most useful, ma'am. I'm hoping to qualify for advanced training that will let me contribute meaningfully to mission success. That's a diplomatic answer, Torres observed with a slight smile. But I'm asking what specifically interests you. Infantry? Intelligence? Special operations support? Sarah considered her response carefully. Expressing interest in certain specialties could be seen as presumptuous for a basic trainee, but Torres seemed to be asking for an honest answer. I'd like to pursue advanced marksmanship training, ma'am. Precision shooting feels like where my skills could make the biggest difference. Torres made another note. Are you familiar with the Army's sniper program requirements? Only generally, ma'am. I know the selection process is extremely competitive and the training is intensive. It is, Torres confirmed. Physical standards are non-negotiable. Psychological evaluation is comprehensive, and the technical requirements eliminate most candidates before they reach advanced training. She closed the folder and looked directly at Sarah. Why do you think you might be successful where others fail? The question demanded a careful balance between confidence and humility. Sarah drew on her grandfather's teachings about understanding one's capabilities without arrogance. I believe I have natural aptitude that's been developed through good early training. But more importantly, I'm willing to do whatever work is necessary to meet any standard. I don't expect anything to be easy, but I'm prepared to earn whatever opportunities might be available. Torres nodded approvingly. That's a mature perspective. She stood, indicating the interview was concluding. Continue performing to standard, Private Mitchell. Torres had asked questions that seemed to go well beyond routine training evaluation, and her specific interest in sniper programs suggested possibilities Sarah had hardly dared to consider. That evening, during the brief period before lights out, Rodriguez approached Sarah's bunk with an unusual expression. My cousin called tonight, he said quietly. The Marine sniper I told you about. I asked him about your grandfather. Sarah felt a flutter of anxiety. Her grandfather's service record was something she was proud of, but she hoped Rodriguez wasn't about to share information that would make her situation more complicated. Staff Sergeant Robert Mitchell was a legend in sniper circles, Rodriguez continued. My cousin said he held several records for long-range precision that stood for years. They called him Ghost Walker because he could get into impossible positions without being detected. The information was new to Sarah. Her grandfather had rarely discussed specific details of his service, focusing instead on teaching fundamental skills and principles. Learning about his reputation added new dimension to her understanding of his legacy. He never talked much about his service accomplishments, Sarah said. He just taught me to shoot straight and think clearly. Rodriguez nodded. According to my cousin, that's exactly what made him special. He was more interested in developing other people than celebrating himself. He paused, then added, "The colonel asking about sniper programs probably isn't coincidence." Before Sarah could respond, the lights-out call echoed through the barracks. But as she lay in her bunk, Rodriguez's words replayed in her mind. The possibility that her grandfather's reputation might be opening doors she hadn't even known existed was both thrilling and daunting. The next morning brought routine training activities, but Sarah noticed continued attention from the instructional staff. During PT, the fitness instructors paid particular attention to her performance on exercises that tested upper body strength and endurance, areas where she had previously struggled to meet male standards. During equipment training, she was given additional opportunities to work with specialized gear, including advanced optics and range-finding equipment that wasn't part of standard basic training curriculum. The extra instruction was subtle enough that most soldiers didn't notice, but Sarah understood she was being evaluated for capabilities beyond basic infantry requirements. The pattern continued throughout the week. Advanced first aid training, navigation exercises with precision requirements, and physical challenges that tested both strength and endurance in combination. Sarah approached each new test methodically, focusing on technique and consistency rather than trying to impress with spectacular individual efforts. By week's end, it became clear that her training experience was diverging from the standard basic training track. Other soldiers in her unit remained focused on general infantry preparation, while Sarah found herself receiving instruction that seemed specifically designed to evaluate specialized capabilities. The culmination came during Friday's final exercise, a comprehensive field problem that tested everything they had learned. But for Sarah, the exercise included additional elements that none of her fellow trainees encountered. While her squad worked through standard tactical problems, Sarah was periodically pulled aside for individual challenges. Long-range target identification with limited equipment, stalking exercises that tested camouflage and fieldcraft, precision shooting scenarios with time pressure and complex environmental factors. Each challenge built on the previous one, creating a comprehensive evaluation of skills that extended far beyond basic marksmanship. Sarah began to understand that her impressive shooting performance had triggered something much larger than routine recognition. As the exercise concluded and equipment was cleaned and stored, Drill Sergeant Williams approached with instructions that confirmed her suspicions. "Private Mitchell, report to the orderly room at 0800 Monday morning. Bring your complete service record and be prepared for extended evaluation." The tone was formal, but Williams' expression suggested something significant was about to happen. Sarah's performance had apparently opened a door, but what lay beyond it remained to be discovered. Monday morning arrived with unseasonable cold, and Sarah found herself standing outside the orderly room 15 minutes before her appointed time. Her dress uniform was immaculate, her service record folder precisely organized, and her mind racing through possibilities for what lay ahead. At exactly 0800, she knocked on the door frame and was instructed to enter. Inside, she found not just Drill Sergeant Williams and Colonel Torres, but two additional officers she didn't recognize. Both wore different branch insignia, and their bearings suggested special operations backgrounds. "Private Mitchell, reporting as ordered," she said, coming to attention. "At ease," Colonel Torres replied. "Take a seat." The room felt charged with an importance that Sarah couldn't quite define. The assembled officers had clearly been discussing her case before her arrival, and several folders were spread across the desk containing what appeared to be extensive documentation. "Private Mitchell," Torres began, "your performance over the past 2 weeks has generated considerable interest from several Army programs. We're here to discuss potential opportunities that extend beyond standard basic training completion." One of the unknown officers, a major with Ranger tabs and Special Forces insignia, leaned forward. "I'm Major Harrison from the Special Operations Recruiting Command. Your marksmanship scores and tactical performance have earned you consideration for accelerated training programs." The second officer, a captain with airborne wings and sniper qualification badges, introduced himself as Captain Rodriguez, no relation to Private Rodriguez in Sarah's unit. I oversee advanced marksmanship program selection. Your shooting consistency and natural ability warrant evaluation for specialized training. Sarah felt overwhelmed by the sudden attention from such high-ranking officers. Just weeks ago, she'd been struggling to prove she belonged in basic training. Now, she was being considered for programs she'd only heard about in whispered conversations among experienced soldiers. "What exactly does this evaluation involve?" she asked. Major Harrison answered first. "There are several paths we're considering. Special operations support positions require additional physical and psychological assessment. The selection process is demanding, with high failure rates, but successful candidates receive training that opens numerous career opportunities." Captain Rodriguez continued. "The advanced marksmanship track focuses specifically on precision shooting capabilities. Candidates undergo intensive evaluation of shooting skills, fieldcraft, and tactical awareness. Those who qualify enter a program that produces some of the Army's most elite marksmen." Colonel Torres added context. "These opportunities are rare, Private Mitchell. We typically evaluate potential candidates after they've completed advanced individual training and demonstrated sustained performance over months or years. Your case is exceptional." The weight of their words settled over Sarah like a heavy blanket. Part of her felt excited by possibilities she'd never imagined. But another part wondered if she was ready for such advanced training when she was still learning basic soldiering. "Ma'am, I'm honored by this consideration," Sarah said carefully. "But I want to make sure I'm ready to succeed rather than wasting everyone's time with premature advancement." The honesty of her response seemed to please the officers. Major Harrison smiled slightly and made a note in his folder. "That's exactly the kind of mature judgment we look for in candidates," he said. "Overconfidence eliminates more prospects than lack of ability. The fact that you're asking about readiness instead of demanding immediate selection shows appropriate perspective." Captain Rodriguez opened a different folder containing what appeared to be shooting records and performance data. "Your grandfather's reputation certainly preceded you, but legacy doesn't guarantee success. What we've observed is your own demonstrated capability combined with teachability and tactical awareness." He pulled out several target sheets from the previous week's exercises. "These results show consistency that can't be taught. But more importantly, your decision-making under pressure indicates the judgment necessary for advanced operations." The reference to her grandfather sparked Sarah's curiosity about connections she might not understand. "Sir, how well known was my grandfather's service record?" Torres and Harrison exchanged a glance that suggested shared knowledge. Torres answered, "Staff Sergeant Robert Mitchell earned a Distinguished Service Cross for actions in Vietnam that remained classified for 30 years. His innovations in long-range precision shooting influenced training programs that are still in use today." The information stunned Sarah. Her grandfather had never mentioned receiving such high decoration, and she'd had no idea his techniques were still being taught in military programs. "He never talked about any of that," she said quietly. "The best soldiers rarely do," Major Harrison observed. "They focus on passing knowledge forward rather than celebrating past achievements. Your grandfather trained several Marines who went on to become legendary snipers themselves. His influence extended far beyond his personal accomplishments." Captain Rodriguez added, "One of those Marines eventually became a training instructor who developed selection criteria we still use. Your shooting style shows clear influence from that lineage, but adapted with your own natural capabilities." The conversation was revealing connections Sarah had never suspected. Her grandfather's quiet teaching had apparently been grounded in techniques that were now part of official military doctrine. "What would these evaluation processes involve?" Sarah asked. Major Harrison outlined the Special Operations Assessment, physical fitness testing beyond standard Army requirements, psychological evaluation, technical skills assessment, and leadership potential evaluation. The process takes 2 weeks and eliminates roughly 80% of candidates. Captain Rodriguez described the marksmanship program. shooting skills evaluation under various conditions, fieldcraft assessment, stalking exercises, and technical instruction on advanced equipment. Success requires not just shooting ability, but comprehensive understanding of precision engagement principles. Both tracks sounded simultaneously exciting and intimidating. Sarah understood she was being offered opportunities that could define her entire military career, but the pressure to succeed felt enormous. "How soon would these evaluations begin?" she asked. "That depends on which path interests you most," Torres replied. "Both programs have upcoming selection cycles, but they require different preparation focuses. You need to choose a primary track while finishing basic training." The decision felt overwhelming. Sarah had entered the Army hoping to prove she could succeed as a regular soldier. Now she was being asked to commit to programs that would place her among the military's most elite performers. "Ma'am, could I have some time to consider these options?" "Of course," Torres said, "but understand that these opportunities are time-sensitive. Selection cycles don't wait for perfect timing, and spots in these programs are extremely limited." Major Harrison added, "We can provide additional information about each track to help inform your decision. But ultimately, you'll need to choose based on your personal goals and willingness to accept the inherent risks." The meeting concluded with Sarah receiving detailed program descriptions and selection timelines. As the officers departed, Colonel Torres remained behind with additional guidance. "Private Mitchell, I want you to understand something important," she said. "Your performance has earned this consideration, but selection for these programs isn't guaranteed. Many excellent soldiers fail advanced training despite strong qualifications." Sarah nodded, appreciating the realistic perspective. "However," Torres continued, "failing selection doesn't end your career. It provides valuable experience and often leads to other specialized opportunities. The willingness to attempt difficult challenges is itself a valuable qualification." That evening, Sarah found herself in the unusual position of having information she couldn't fully share with her fellow trainees. The special programs were classified at levels that prevented casual discussion, and she didn't want to create additional separation between herself and her unit. But Rodriguez approached during personal time with questions that suggested he'd noticed her extended absence from training. "Everything all right, Mitchell? You seem pretty focused during chow tonight." Sarah considered how much she could share without violating security requirements. "Just got some information about potential advanced training opportunities. Trying to figure out what makes sense." Rodriguez nodded knowingly. "My cousin mentioned that opportunities sometimes come fast in the military. Said the key is being honest about what you're ready for versus what sounds exciting." The insight resonated with Sarah's own uncertainty. The programs being offered were undeniably exciting, but she needed to evaluate whether pursuing them aligned with realistic assessment of her capabilities. Over the following days, Sarah found herself analyzing every aspect of her performance with new intensity. Physical fitness sessions became evaluations of her endurance and strength relative to special operations requirements. Marksmanship practice turned into assessment of her consistency under varying conditions. Even routine tasks were viewed through the lens of whether they demonstrated readiness for advanced challenges. The analysis revealed both strengths and areas needing improvement. Her shooting skills were genuinely exceptional, and her tactical judgment appeared sound. But her physical fitness, while meeting standard requirements, would need significant improvement to match special operations standards. Her decision-making under pressure seemed solid, but she'd never been tested in scenarios that matched the intensity of advanced training programs. Her leadership experience was minimal, and she'd never had responsibility for other soldiers' safety in genuine high-stakes situations. The honest self-assessment created a clearer picture of the challenges she would face. Both programs would push her beyond anything she'd experienced, with no guarantee of success despite her demonstrated abilities. But the opportunity itself represented validation of everything she'd worked toward since arriving at basic training. Being considered for such elite programs meant her performance had been recognized at the highest levels, regardless of whether she ultimately succeeded in advanced selection. As the week progressed, Sarah realized her decision would need to balance ambition with realistic assessment of her readiness. The programs offered incredible opportunities, but pursuing them too early could result in failure that might close future doors. The pressure of choosing her path was complicated by awareness that her decision would likely determine the entire trajectory of her military career. Success in special operations or advanced marksmanship would open possibilities she could hardly imagine. Failure would still provide valuable experience, but might also label her as someone who couldn't meet elite standards. Friday brought another conversation with Colonel Torres that would help clarify her decision. But as Sarah prepared for that meeting, she remained uncertain about which path offered the best balance between opportunity and realistic prospects for success. The final week of basic training arrived with unexpected intensity. Sarah had made her decision about the specialized programs, but implementation required careful timing and additional preparation that pushed her beyond standard training requirements. Thursday morning brought the culminating field exercise, a comprehensive test that would demonstrate everything the trainees had learned over their weeks at Fort Carson. But for Sarah, the exercise included a special component that would serve as her preliminary evaluation for advanced marksmanship training. She reported to the range before dawn, where Captain Rodriguez waited with specialized equipment she'd never seen before. Advanced optical scopes, wind measurement devices, range-finding equipment, and ammunition that appeared different from standard training rounds. "This isn't part of regular basic training curriculum," Rodriguez explained as he set up the equipment. "Today's evaluation will test capabilities that most soldiers never develop. The scenarios are designed to match what you'd encounter in advanced sniper training." The first test involved long-range precision shooting at targets positioned beyond normal training distances. Sarah had to account for wind conditions that changed throughout the exercise, elevation adjustments that required mathematical calculations, and environmental factors that affected bullet trajectory. Her grandfather's training proved invaluable here. The principles he'd taught about reading wind patterns, understanding ballistic behavior, and maintaining consistency across varying conditions all applied to these advanced challenges. But the technical requirements exceeded anything she practiced with civilian equipment. The second phase tested her ability to engage multiple targets in time-limited scenarios while maintaining precision standards. Pop-up targets appeared at various ranges and exposure times, requiring rapid target acquisition without sacrificing accuracy. The exercise demanded both speed and absolute precision, a combination that eliminated many candidates for advanced programs. Sarah found herself settling into the focused mindset her grandfather had taught her. The external pressure faded, leaving only the fundamental relationship between shooter, rifle, and target. Her breathing, controlled timing, her sight picture guided placement, and her trigger control delivered consistent results. When the shooting phase concluded, Captain Rodriguez reviewed her results with obvious interest. The target patterns showed groupings that exceeded normal training standards, with consistency that demonstrated natural ability combined with solid technical foundation. "Impressive work, Private Mitchell," he said while documenting her scores. "Your precision at extended range is exactly what we look for in sniper candidates." But the real test comes next. The fieldcraft evaluation followed, an assessment of skills that separated precision marksmen from mere good shooters. Sarah had to demonstrate camouflage techniques, stalking ability, observation skills, and the patience necessary for specialized missions. The stalking exercise required her to move undetected across varied terrain to reach a firing position within range of designated targets. Instructors positioned throughout the course watched for any movement or concealment failures that would compromise her position. Sarah moved slowly and methodically, using natural cover and shadow patterns to mask her approach. The techniques were largely instinctive, based on hunting experience with her grandfather, but the military application demanded greater precision and discipline than she'd ever practiced. The final position required her to remain motionless for over an hour while observing and reporting on activities in a simulated enemy camp. The mental discipline needed to maintain focus while fighting off fatigue, discomfort, and boredom tested capabilities that couldn't be measured through shooting scores alone. When the evaluation concluded, Sarah felt drained but confident in her performance. The challenges had pushed her abilities, but nothing had exceeded her capabilities completely. More importantly, she'd maintained composure and focus throughout exercises that were designed to create stress and confusion. That afternoon brought the final element of basic training, graduation ceremony, and assignment announcements. Sarah's parents had made the trip from Montana, and seeing them in the audience added emotional weight to a day already charged with significance. The ceremony proceeded through standard military protocol, with individual recognition for outstanding performance in various categories. Sarah received recognition for marksmanship excellence, but the award felt almost anticlimactic given the specialized evaluations she'd been undergoing. After the formal ceremony, families were invited to meet with soldiers and their training cadre. Sarah's parents approached with obvious pride, but also curiosity about her experiences that she couldn't fully share due to classification requirements. "You look different," her mother observed. "More confident, somehow." Sarah's father, himself a veteran, studied her with the practiced eye of someone who understood military bearing. "She carries herself like a soldier now. That's what good training does." Their conversation was interrupted by Colonel Torres approaching with a folder that clearly contained Sarah's assignment orders. The moment felt pivotal. Weeks of uncertainty about her future were about to be resolved. "Congratulations on completing basic training, Private Mitchell," Torres said. "Your performance has earned you assignment to advanced individual training with a specialized component that few soldiers receive." She handed Sarah the orders, which detailed assignment to Fort Benning for infantry training followed by evaluation for the advanced marksmanship unit. The path represented exactly what Sarah had hoped for: advanced training that would challenge her capabilities while providing opportunity for specialized development. The Advanced Marksmanship Unit evaluation is scheduled for the conclusion of your infantry training, Torres continued. Success there leads to additional specialized instruction that could define your entire career trajectory. Sarah's parents listened with growing amazement as Torres outlined opportunities that extended far beyond their expectations for their daughter's military service. The recognition she'd earned had opened doors to training programs that produced some of the Army's most elite marksmen. But Torres included important context about the challenges ahead. The evaluation process eliminates most candidates, regardless of their demonstrated abilities. Success requires not just shooting skills, but comprehensive mastery of fieldcraft, tactical knowledge, and psychological resilience. After Torres departed, Sarah found herself in conversation with several fellow graduates who had heard rumors about her specialized opportunities. The attention was flattering, but also somewhat isolating. Her path was diverging from theirs in ways that created natural separation. Rodriguez approached with genuine congratulations and insight from his ongoing correspondence with his Marine cousin. He said to tell you that earning consideration for advanced programs is just the beginning. The real work starts when you get to specialized training. The advice resonated with Sarah's own understanding of the challenges ahead. Basic training had been demanding, but everything she'd learned suggested that advanced programs operated at intensity levels that would test her capabilities completely. That evening, during the brief celebration period before departure, Sarah reflected on how dramatically her situation had changed since arriving at Fort Carson. She'd entered basic training hoping to prove she belonged in the Army. Now she was preparing for evaluations that could place her among the military's most specialized operators. The transformation had happened gradually, through daily demonstrations of capability rather than single dramatic moments. But looking back, Sarah could identify the shooting exercise that had triggered everything else, the moment when her natural abilities had been recognized by instructors qualified to evaluate elite-level potential. Her grandfather's influence had been crucial, providing foundation skills and mental frameworks that enabled her success. But the application of those skills in military contexts had required adaptation and development that went beyond anything he could have taught directly. The opportunity ahead represented both culmination of her basic training success and beginning of challenges that would determine whether she could perform at truly elite levels. The Advanced Marksmanship Unit evaluation would test not just her shooting abilities, but her overall suitability for specialized roles that carried enormous responsibility. As she prepared for sleep on her final night at Fort Carson, Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension that seemed appropriate for someone about to attempt something genuinely difficult. The path ahead would demand everything she could give, with no guarantee of success despite her demonstrated capabilities. But she also felt confidence grounded in objective evidence of her abilities. The recognition she'd earned hadn't come through favoritism or lowered standards. It had resulted from performance that met elite criteria consistently across multiple evaluations. The following morning brought departure for Fort Benning and the next phase of her development. As the bus pulled away from Fort Carson, Sarah watched the training facilities where she'd proven herself disappear in the distance. Those ranges and obstacle courses had been the testing ground where she discovered capabilities she'd never fully understood. But they'd also been where she'd learned that natural ability alone wasn't sufficient for military success. The discipline, teamwork, and mental resilience she developed during basic training would be just as important as marksmanship skills in the challenges ahead. 3 months later, during an advanced training exercise at Fort Benning, Sarah found herself in a shooting position that tested every skill she'd developed since leaving Montana. The target was nearly 1,000 meters away, wind conditions were challenging, and multiple instructors were evaluating her performance for final selection into specialized programs. As she settled into firing position, Sarah heard footsteps approaching from behind. Colonel Torres, who had apparently traveled to Fort Benning to observe final evaluations, knelt beside her position with binoculars focused on the distant target. "Steady breathing, Private Mitchell," Torres said quietly. "This is what everything has been building toward." Sarah's shot broke cleanly, and through her scope, she watched the target drop immediately. But it was Torres' next words that she would remember for the rest of her career. "Perfect center hit. That's the Black Viper mark." The term meant nothing to Sarah at the time, but the approving tone in Torres' voice suggested significance beyond a simple good shot. Only later would she learn that Black Viper was the informal designation for precision shots that met the highest standards of the Advanced Marksmanship Unit, shots that demonstrated not just accuracy, but the kind of perfection achieved only by truly elite marksmen. That moment marked not just the culmination of her basic training journey, but the beginning of a career that would take her far beyond anything she'd imagined when she first arrived at Fort Carson as an uncertain recruit, hoping to prove she belonged. The same soldiers who had once mocked her during drills would eventually read about her achievements in military publications, learning that the quiet soldier they'd underestimated had gone on to earn recognition as one of the Army's most accomplished precision marksmen. But for Sarah, the real victory had been earning the right to pursue those opportunities through demonstrated excellence rather than special consideration. Everything that followed was built on the foundation of that first moment when her abilities had been recognized by people qualified to evaluate genuine military potential. The Black Viper mark would become her signature, a standard of precision that few soldiers ever achieved. But it represented more than just shooting ability. It symbolized the journey from unproven recruit to elite operator, earned through dedication, skill, and unwavering commitment to excellence under pressure.